time for our academic, Judith Glazner, almost Dr. Judith Glazner, to come up and just share with us the research that she's already started on for her PhD. Judith has been in CF for over 25 years, and the amount of change you have seen must be mind-blowing. So please come and join us, Judith, and thank you for being here.
Thank you, Nettie. I'm really thrilled to be here. Minister Hunt, ladies and gentlemen, and especially the brothers and sisters of people with cystic fibrosis, thank you for the wonderful opportunity to speak to you today at this really important siblings gathering. As you just heard, for over 25 years, I've had the privilege of working with children with cystic fibrosis at the Royal Children's Hospital in Melbourne. When I first started my role, I quickly realised that I was working not only with the children affected by CF, but with other family members who were also impacted by this demanding and incurable disease. With CF, family routines are skewed, treatment is an overwhelming priority, and the relationship between parents and well children can be strained in ways rarely experienced by other families. The daily CF treatment regimen is complex, burdensome and time-consuming, taking on average 2 to 4 hours a day, but for many people, many more hours than that. And it requires a high level of parental supervision through infancy, childhood and adolescence. The demands CF care places on parents raises questions about the allocation of time and attention to other healthy siblings in the family. There are only so many hours in a day. In my role, I often found myself in conversations with distressed parents who were concerned about the focus and time spent on treatments with their child with CF and the potentially negative impact on their other children. My interactions with the siblings of young children with CF highlighted the impact on brothers and sisters. The following letter of thanks I received for writing a reference for the sister of one of my patients provided one such example. She wrote, "Dear Judith, thank you so much for the letter you wrote for my scholarship application regarding my brother with CF. It was fantastically written, but it was also really comforting to have someone acknowledge the emotional impact of having a sibling, someone you're supposed to be equal with, who has CF. I'd do anything I could to help him, swap places every day, and it's frustrating to know that I can't really do much in the end." When I searched extensively for information about the impact of chronic illness and specifically CF on siblings, I found a paucity of research, both locally and internationally. This lack of information prompted me to undertake my PhD so that I could better understand the experiences of CF from the perspective of siblings. Curiously, my research question may have also been driven by the fact that I'm actually an only child. So I think I couldn't really understand sibling relationships anyway, let alone siblings where one has CF. Sibling relationships are one of the most important long-term relationships children have, or so I'm told. They serve as important models for future interactions with peers. All siblings experience intense emotions including love, envy, empathy and companionship. These are likely to be exaggerated when one sibling has a chronic illness such as cystic fibrosis. But to date, the jury's really been out about the actual impact of CF on the well siblings. So let me tell you a bit about what I did and what I found. My PhD was supervised by two of the world's leading researchers in cystic fibrosis, Dr. Alexandra Quitner from the Nicholas Children's Research Institute in the US, and Professor Susan Sawyer, Director of the Centre for Adolescent Health at the Royal Children's Hospital in Melbourne. My research was a mixed method study. It was qualitative as well as quantitative. The overall objective of my study was to assess the extent of parental differential treatment in two types of families, those with a well child and a child with CF, and those with two healthy children. In addition, the impact of differential treatment on the quality of the sibling relationship and the social and emotional adjustment of well siblings in families caring for a child with CF were examined. So my study evaluated a cohort of 39 children growing up with a younger sibling with CF and 29 comparison families with similarly aged healthy children. The children in my study were between 6 and 17. Information on the amount of time parents spent in daily activities with the younger and older siblings were collected from both mothers and fathers using daily phone diaries developed by Dr. Alexandra Quitner. And this was exciting. It was the first time that this daily phone diary software was actually used in an Australian study. Data were collected from older siblings on a range of social and emotional variables, and both younger and older siblings rated the quality of the sibling relationship. So what did I find? Well, interestingly, I found evidence of parental differential treatment for fathers, but not for mothers. I found that fathers spent more time with the younger child with CF than the older healthy siblings. And high levels of father's differential treatment were consistently associated with the older siblings, the well siblings, indicating a perception of parental bias toward the child with CF. Despite the limitations of cross-sectional research, where you just collect information at one point in time, a major strength of my study was the recruitment of fathers, whose contribution to family life is often neglected in studies of families caring for children with chronic health conditions. The qualitative aspect of my study involved me asking the siblings 4 questions. These were: what happens to you when your brother or sister goes into hospital? What are 3 good things about having a brother or sister with CF? What are 3 things that make it difficult about having a brother or sister with CF? And what would make things better or easier for you? And it was really the answers to these questions that yielded some of the most interesting information in my research. As expected, the responses of siblings differed greatly according to their age and maturity. Not surprisingly, the daily routines of well siblings were disrupted by hospitalisation of their sibling with CF. And although some well siblings found the change in arrangements a fun or positive experience, such as staying with friends or relatives, for most it was a negative one. For example, one sibling said, "I feel a bit left out. I go off to grandma's house or I'm shipped off to other people's houses." The most frequently cited challenge about having a sibling with CF was the difficulty associated with committing to after-school activities because of the unpredictable nature of their sibling's illness. Several siblings talked about not knowing what the day would bring and whether they'd come home from school to find that their brother or sister required admission to hospital. Regularly being late for school because of the treatments that happened before school was another common theme. These relatively simple questions generated some really interesting insights about the impact of CF. One area of concern related to the worry that healthy siblings had about passing on infections, a consistent theme even at a young age. Another child was highly anxious about the risk of death of her sibling, which was really quite inconsistent with the health of her brother at the time. These concerns suggested the presence of underlying anxieties and fears about their sibling with CF. Some siblings, interestingly, qualified their responses about their brother or sister with CF getting more time and attention from parents with comments such as, "I know this is how it has to be," or "I know it has to be like this." The siblings in my study strongly endorsed the need for support through research, actually thanked me for giving them a voice, and also talked about their need for being connected with other siblings. Years ago, before I embarked on this research, the proportion of families with healthy siblings was unknown. Data on siblings were not routinely collected in clinics. We just didn't ask about the experiences of the other children in the family. Since undertaking this study, my clinical practice has greatly changed. I pay far more attention to the well-being of siblings using some relatively simple interventions to buffer the potential impact on them. At diagnosis, following newborn screening, I now make a point of talking with both parents about the notion of parental differential treatment, which is unavoidable because of the demands of CF, but highlighting the importance of including siblings and including them in the communication, bringing them to clinic, having some special time with them wherever possible. There's been a lot of interest in my research, which is really exciting, and I've presented my findings at national and international conferences. I can't tell you how thrilled I am that CF Australia recognises that CF impacts the whole family and is putting the wellbeing of the siblings on its agenda. So thank you, Nettie.
Thanks, Judith.
I was just going to mention, many of you will be familiar with the TIDE study that happened in 2016, the International Depression Epidemiological Study, which evaluated the prevalence of anxiety and depression in parent caregivers of children and adolescents with CF. They actually recruited from 154 CF centres across 9 European countries and the US. Parents of children and adolescents up to 18 years of age completed standardised measures of depression and anxiety. And they found elevated symptoms of depression in 37% of mothers and 31% of fathers, while elevated levels of anxiety were found in 48% of mothers and 36% of fathers. The same study used standardised measures of depression and anxiety in adolescents aged 12 and over and adults with CF. Elevated symptoms of depression were found in 10% of adolescents and 19% of adults, while elevated symptoms of anxiety were found in 22% of adolescents and 32% of adults with CF. Symptoms of common psychological distress are therefore highly prevalent in parents as well as adolescents and adults with CF. Wouldn't it be wonderful if we could actually lead the world and replicate this study, including the adolescents and adult siblings of people with CF? Currently, approximately half the individuals with CF in Australia, US and Canada are adults, which represents a remarkable change in the prognosis of this disease over the past 20 years. The improving outlook for people with CF means that the sibling relationship is more important than ever. We need to understand more about the bidirectional nature of the sibling relationship, like we just heard about, and also across the lifespan and across the illness trajectory. So in closing, my research and my clinical experience has affirmed that siblings are brave beyond words, often very mature, and display incredible courage. It's time for us to acknowledge and support the siblings of children, adolescents and adults with CF. Thank you.